Hi everybody, it's Liz Jansen, and today I'm speaking with Gary McKechnie in Mount Dora, Florida. Gary's known for a lot of things that we're going to be talking about. The way that I've gotten to know him is through his book, Great American Motorcycle Tours, which I used 10 years ago, and I've just bought his most recent copy to do some planning for motorcycling, travel that I'm going to be doing. So Gary has, started life very differently than what he's been doing now. So he was on a 9-to-5 job, and then he was bored with that. So he sold his house and he set out on his motorcycle. And since then, life has taken amazing turns for him. And rather than me read it, we're going to talk about that. So Gary, welcome, first of all, and thank you for being here. It's like you're living a dream life, I think.
Yeah, it pretty much is a dream life, and sometimes I forget how dreamy it is until I talk to friends and they point out, you really get to do a lot of things, a lot of stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, you're right. It wasn't always this way.
But it certainly became that way. What made you, you were bored, but what gave you the courage, I guess, to take that risk? Because there was a risk.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, sure, there was a risk, but I'll tell you the epiphany for me came in 1997, 98. I was 36 years old, 35, 36 years old, and I had been working as an ad copywriter. I'd worked for a few agencies in Orlando, and I was just writing ad copy for things I didn't care about. And it was like just toiling away and having no satisfaction, no sense of purpose, and really nothing to be proud of. And I got a call one day from a shopping mall in Orlando, and they asked me to come in and discuss the marketing ideas. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it's a commercial, maybe it's a press kit, maybe it's a new video that they want. And I went in and I sat down, and they said, well, what we want you to do is come up with some ideas that we can put on signs, and we'll put those signs on the back of the ladies' bathroom stall. So when they go in the bathroom and sit down and close the door, they'll be looking at this ad. And I just thought, oh God, if this is where my career has taken me, to write bathroom stall copy, I just knew it was time to really set the bar high. And so, I mean, if it was the Hindu wheel of life, I was wondering what had I done wrong to be at this point. So in any event, I just said, whatever I have to do to get away from that and figure out what it is that I really want to do, I was going to do that. Unfortunately, my wife, Nancy, said, what is your passion? And it had been so long since I had a passion, I didn't even know what she was talking about. Truly, I did not know what she was talking about. She said, what do you have to do that once you get started, you won't rest until it's done? And I thought, gosh, if I could do something extraordinary, it would be getting on a motorcycle and riding across America. And once I figured that out, it was like, yeah, okay, now what do I do with that information? And I had to figure out a way to monetize it. And so I was a travel writer in addition to being an ad copywriter. So I pitched about 60 different publishers. They all loved the idea for a national motorcycle tour book. And then they all rejected it. And it was crazy. I'm thinking, wait, you like it, but you don't want it. So I finally, I could have thrown in the towel and gone back to writing ad copy again. But I just thought, no, I'm going to keep going. I've got to pursue this until it happens. And I found a publisher. I literally, this is kismet, because I was so tired of putting packages together and mailing them in and waiting for 2 months to hear back that they liked the idea but wouldn't buy it, that I just said, well, screw it. I just got on the phone and I called and I talked to the acquisitions editor at John Muir Publishing, and I just said, look, I've got this idea for a book. I want to get on a motorcycle, ride around America, write a book about motorcycle touring. And I just spat all this information out because I thought this is my one chance to make an impression. And I didn't want her to say anything until I was done making my pitch. And when I got done, my heart's just beating fast, and I'm just thinking, oh gosh, and she was silent, and I thought, oh, I blew it. And she goes, we've been looking for 2 years for somebody to write a book about motorcycle touring. It's like, oh, thank God. So anyway, that was like throwing a lifeline. Somebody grabbed it and they hauled me in, because I couldn't have stood going down that same path that I was going down as an ad copywriter. So in any event, they signed off on the idea. They gave me a small advance. One thing led to another, and on September 6, 1998, started traveling around America on a motorcycle. We sold the house, had a little bit of cash, and just took off. And it lasted on and off about 18 months. We'd go out for a month or two and then come back home. I'd write for, a week or two, and then we'd go back out and do it again. And, just kept bouncing around and writing on the road. So anyway, that's the short, long version of the story, or the longer, short version.
It's a great story because it talks about persistence too.
Oh, truly. Yeah, absolutely. You have to have it. Calvin Coolidge said that. Nothing takes the place of persistence. You have to keep pushing through. Calvin Coolidge was our 25th president. Anyway, there you go.
So you came up with Great American Motorcycle Tours. That first book must have been the one that I used.
Possibly. It came out in May of 2000. So gosh, I can't believe it's been 13 years now, and now it's just gone into its 5th edition. So it came out, and it did better than I expected. It did better than my publisher expected, and that's why it just keeps going. It won a few awards from the Society of American Travel Writers.
Yeah.
It's like the Pulitzer Prize of travel writing, in the Benjamin Franklin award for the Publishers Marketing Association. And, it's been featured in a lot of different, USA Today, CNN, CBS Radio has done stuff about it, Southwest, United Airlines. So it keeps going. It keeps going along.
It's a fabulous book. And what I really like about it is that you go into it's like, the real, it's not the big box stuff. It's the real. It's the small towns. It's the real people that you meet. It's the mom and pop places. It's the things that are important. It's where you go to be quiet. It's all of those things.
Oh, thanks, Liz, very much. Yeah, and that was the intent. I don't know in Canada if you're familiar with Charles Kuralt, who was a newsman on CBS, but he had a series called On the Road, and for about 25 years, he got in a motorhome and he traveled all across the United States, and he just went and he found these stories that were off the beaten path, and he was a major influence on me. So when I started putting the book together, I thought, I'm not going to take people from Miami to Atlanta or from Los Angeles to San Francisco. I'm going to put them in small towns outside the major cities where you can take your motorcycle, you can park your bike, you can walk around, and it basically just find these little slices of Americana, and then you get on these back roads and you travel across the United States, and on like little 2-lane roads, twisty roads, roads that are great for motorcycling. And it could be across the desert, like in Death Valley, or it could be along the spine of the Blue Ridge Mountains as you go from Mount Airy, North Carolina, down to Hendersonville, North Carolina, on the Blue Ridge Parkway. So that's what I was trying to get to, and that's why I recommend, instead of like chain restaurants, it's always like a little diner, and some local attractions and that sort of thing. I just wanted it to be pure Americana.
And it is, and those places are harder and harder to find, but they're there. It's so rewarding when you do find them.
Yeah, sure.
Now, you and your wife operate Coconut Cottage Inn, a B&B in Mount Dora. Yeah, and you say that's where you get a lot of your creative idea from the people that come there. How's that?
Oh, it's funny because we cater to travelers just by the nature of being a bed and breakfast. We'll have conversations with guests. Breakfast, if you're eating by yourself, it might take 10 minutes. But when you're sitting around a table where people have come in from usually all around Florida, and sometimes from out of state, you talk and everybody has these ideas about, where they've been. They share stories, they share life experiences, and you just sit there and think of it. And for me, I think the inspiration and the creativity comes from listening to these people and realizing you're working on a much larger scale. You're not just working, your frame of reference isn't just Mount Dora, Florida. It's Mount Dora if they've traveled to Africa or Thailand or Canada or South America or wherever. They're always doing something. And for me, that sort of fuels my passion as a traveler. It's like wanting to go out and see things again. I mean, a lot of us get caught up, and I do it too. We get caught up in a routine where, you couldn't pry me out of my chair. I'm sitting behind the computer and I'm working, and And I just think, well, this is what I do. But once you get dislodged from that computer and you get out on your motorcycle and you start going, all that garbage and all that stuff that you think is really important back home, it just seems to fade away. You're more engaged. I mean, you ride a motorcycle. I mean, and anybody who rides a motorcycle knows once you break away from your home port and you're out there, it's like you're plugged in, you're really engaged, you're seeing the world all around you, and it's just fabulous. I mean, it's just incredible. If you do it in a car, it's one thing, it's good. If you do it in an RV, it's one thing and it's good. But if you do it on a motorcycle, I think it's just more impactful.
You talked about being in your home port, and which leads me to something else that you do too. So you've got a number of high-profile clients. You've got Harley Davidson, National Geographic Traveler magazine, all kinds of national papers that you've written for other big clients, and you speak. You do historic talks on the Queen Mary and the Queen Victoria. How did all that come about? Because we're talking about motorcycling, yes, but we're also talking about somebody that's following their passion and has taken risks to do these and is being very successful with it.
Yeah, and when we say client, I should couch that because Harley Davidson is not like a regular client. I've written for them before, and I've written for National Geographic Traveler before in a lot of different magazines. What led to the speaking engagements is after the motorcycle book was out, it's sort of like well, what have you done lately? And so that had been out for a few years, and I thought, well, I better up my game again because I was falling back into that same trap that I'd been in before. I was starting to write for Disney, but doing the same sort of stuff. And it's like, oh God, this is, hey, a few years ago I was riding a motorcycle across America. Now I'm writing about Fantasyland or whatever. And it's crazy. So I pitched National Geographic on a book called USA 101. Mm-hmm. And it didn't take much. I mean, it was literally another phone call, like to the acquisitions editor at John Muir. I accidentally called the guy I thought was in accounting. And it's a long story, but he was the acquisitions editor, and he loved the concept of this book about 101 American icons. So again, we didn't have to sell the house this time, but we took a couple of years off and traveled around America, and I wrote about 101 iconic American places, events, and festivals. And when that was done, that was a bear of a job. I mean, that was really, really tough, trying to condense all this information into a book. And once I got done with that, I thought, man, I can't just let this go. I put a lot of effort into this. So I thought, well, who wants to hear, stories about Americana? And I thought, well, somebody coming to America, and how do they get here? And if it's on a plane, they can't listen to it. And I thought, who, comes over here a different way? And I thought of Cunard, which is the only ocean liner in the world. It's not a cruise ship. It's an ocean liner. It's the Queen Mary II, and at the time, the Queen Victoria. And so another example of Kismet, the same way with John Muir, the same way with National Geographic, I literally called the Cunard reservation line. I said, could I speak to your entertainment director? And for some God unknown reason, they put me through. And the woman who answered, bless her heart, she was great. I told her, I said, hey, I just finished this book for National Geographic called USA 101. I used to do stand-up comedy and public speaking, to a small degree. And I think, your passengers coming over from England would be really interested in this. And she said, great, well, that sounds good to me. And long story short, she calls me back a few months later and she says, well, we'd like to invite you to on a cruise from New York to New York. I said, what, like New York to England and New York? She goes, no, New York to the Caribbean and back to New York. It's a 15-day cruise. Over Christmas and New Year's. I said, I'll take it. She goes, well, do you want to talk to your wife about it? I said, no, I'll take it. And so, I did that first one on the Queen Mary II. I talked about America and travel and history and our cultural heritage, and it went over well, so they invited me back. And so since then, I've sailed with Cunard 5 times and doing one in September and another one in December. I've been to Hawaii. I just spoke on Silver Sea ship, the Silver Shadow up in Alaska. I spoke on Princess, went down to South America, worked with Seabourn going up to Quebec City a couple of times now. So it's really great. So we have the bed and breakfast, the motorcycling stuff, and the cruise lines, tooling around the world.
A lot of people would look at what you've done, and if they think about themselves, say, well, you know what, I can't do that. It's too late in my life. I can't, follow. It's too risky for me to do that. I'm sort of secure where I am, and I don't want to take a chance. Hey, what do you say?
Well, what I say is, it's really funny how these, you probably have mentors in your life and moments in your life that just sort of like stick in your head. And I remember I was in community college. I was 18 years old, and the guest speaker came to Valencia Community College in Orlando, and he was talking about a friend of his, and this guy was probably about 35 years old. I was 18, and he was talking about a friend of his, and he said, she's 55 years old, and she said she always wanted to be a dentist. And he said, so I said, well, go to dental school. And she said, well, by the time I get out, I'll be, 60 years old. And he goes, well, guess what? You're going to be 60 years old anyway. Wouldn't it be nice to be 60 and be a dentist? And she went to dental school. And I always thought, that always stuck with me for some reason. And so age, shouldn't really be a factor. I mean, if you want to do something, time's going by anyway, regardless of whether you decide to do something or not do something. Mm-hmm. So do something. And I mean, here's another bit of advice that I always share with friends, because it made a huge impact on me. Prior to becoming a freelance writer, I was just sort of adrift. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do, because in America, I'm not sure if it's so much true in Canada, but it's drilled into you, you've got to pursue money. You finish high school, you go to college, then you get the job that's going to pay you a lot of money so you can get X, Y, and Z, all these things that you want. And so that was in my head. Well, hey, if I don't have $1 million by the time I'm 30, I'm a failure. And that was always the motivator. And I had a friend of mine give me some good advice. Because he saw I was sort of conflicted. And he said, well, Gary, if you had $1 million in the bank, if you had $1 million in your bank account, and you woke up tomorrow morning and you didn't have to go to work, what would you do? How would you spend your day? And I thought, wow, when you take money out of the equation, what would really make me happy is if I could travel and I could write. And he said, well, there you go. That's it. That's the answer. He said, that's what you really want to do. You want to travel and write. Figure out a way to make a little bit of money at it, and you'll be happy. And it was like, great. I don't have to make a lot of money. I just have to do what I like to do and make enough money. And that was, that just opened the floodgates. And, so became a travel writer, and, all these different things led to the next thing. And that's how it all started. So figure out what you want to do. I mean, if you're watching this, obviously you're curious and interested in figuring out ways to do something, whether it's ride a motorcycle across America, or whether it's going back to school, or whether it's, going to the Caribbean and working at a boat concession, or whatever makes you happy, figure out what it is. I mean, if you're, another thing, if you're working at a job, and you get like 2 weeks vacation a year. I mean, if you extrapolate that means you're going to work 26 years for a company to get 1 year of your life to yourself. And, if you think that's a good bargain, stick with it. But you've got a finite amount of time. So start to figure out what makes you happy.
I haven't heard it put that way before, but that's great.
Yeah, it's sort of an awakening, because, it's, why waste your time doing something that you don't like? I mean, especially if you think, well, at least I've got the weekend, and it's like, well, it's 2 days a week, and then half of the day on Sunday you're moaning and bitching because I've got to go back to work tomorrow. So anyway.
I use this similar line of thinking. I was thinking about, should I go away on my motorcycle this summer? For maybe 5 or 6 weeks, and it's like, okay, when am I going to do it if I'm not, what am I waiting for, right? So got your book and
yeah. Well, I'm glad. And Liz, I do have to confess, like I said, it happens to me too. I mean, before I headed out last summer, but I was very, very fortunate. I got to do some trips up to the Hudson River Valley, and I did that, and I was able to ride a BMW, courtesy of BMW, and then Milwaukee up to Door County, Wisconsin, courtesy of Harley Davidson. They lent me a bike, but whether somebody lends you a bike or not, you can still go. And when I was getting ready to go out in August, and I had to go out and do the American West, and I mean, a big chunk of land for like 2 months. And I'm thinking, oh, and I'm making every excuse in the book not to go. Well, maybe I can just phone this one in. Maybe I can just like update these chapters and not have to go there because I've got, this project and that project and another project due, and all of these things have to happen, and I've got to be here to take care of this stuff. And I mean, I was convincing myself not to go, and eventually I had to go. It's like I knew I had to go. And literally, once I got out there and got started, it was just like, what was all that nonsense? What was all that BS I was feeding myself? Because it turned out that 2 months turned out to be like the best consecutive 2 months of my life. I mean, it was phenomenal. Everything I saw and everything I did. And do I have time to tell you another quick story?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a great story. And here's another analogy to have to think about it. When the American space program was getting started, we were doing orbital flights. Just tooling around the Earth, as if they were simple.
Right? John
But President Kennedy, he shared a story when he said man was going to go to the moon. And this was 1961, I believe, 61 or 62. I think it was 61. He said man's going to go to the moon and come back by the end of this decade. And the story that he told, he said, it was of a boy who would walk across this field, and across this field was this high brick wall that he couldn't get over. And so he'd walk across the field and he'd want to keep going, but he couldn't go because he'd get to that brick wall and he'd turn around and he'd go back. And he said one day the boy gets to the brick wall and he takes his cap off and he throws it over the wall. And now he's got to climb over the wall and get to the other side and move forward. And he said, we're throwing our cap over the wall. And that's what you got to do. Sometimes you just got to throw your cap over the wall and move forward. And despite all of the things that are telling you it's safer on this side of the wall, I'm content over here. You've just got to keep moving forward. Throw your cap over and go after it, and you're going to be amazed what's ahead of you.
Yeah, I like that. So what's next for Gary McKechnie?
Ooh, next, well, you're one of the first to know, and hopefully I'll have a video up soon. Just yesterday, I sent my book into the stratosphere. I wanted to do the world's first literary book launch, so I found a company that does weather balloon launches.
Oh, you did? I saw that. And that's really, I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, and so I found these guys, and they have GPS trackers on the thing, and so they put my book between plexiglass and tied it to a weather balloon and shot it up out in Colorado, and it went up to like 16 and a half miles, almost 90,000 feet.
Whoa!
So I'll have
that's how to launch a book.
Yeah, it's a great book launch. So that's going to go on, so I've got that done. Like I said, I might be doing some promotional stuff for my motorcycle book. And then I've got, I'm sailing up to Quebec in September and sailing down to the Caribbean in December. And I've got some ideas for some other book projects that I'd like to work on.
It sounds like you've got your plate full.
Yeah, but it's, oh man.
It's all good stuff.
It can always be more full. Everybody, I know a woman who lives in town, and she was Miss Florida twice. For 2 different pageants. She's an opera singer, she's a building designer, a building contractor, she's an author, and she does all this stuff. And I said, how do you do all this? And she says, well, I know what I'm doing. She goes, how do you do all your stuff? And I said, well, I know what I'm doing. And, it's sort of like, whatever you do, whatever capacity field you work in, it's like, that stuff and you can always take more. The good part is when you go outside of that comfort level that we're talking about and you add more to that, and then you get this greater base to work from, and you see what's important and what's not important, and you just automatically start working toward the stuff that you find is important.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's been great. It's been great speaking with you, getting to know you, and again, we'll put links for your website and the latest edition of your book and everything else you're doing. I hope we meet on the road someday.
Yeah, I hope so too, Liz. And congratulations on what you're doing. I mean, because I've been to your website, and to see how you're sharing your experience, to get other people to take some bold steps. Whether it's on a motorcycle, in a car, unicycle or stilts or however, whatever it takes. Maybe it's a job switch, maybe it's a trip, maybe it's whatever they want it to be. But yeah, people, in that's what drives me, is because I don't think I'm there yet. I keep trying to get there. And some people say, "Hey, you've already arrived." It's like nobody arrives. Nobody arrives.
I look at it as though we're here on Earth school, and until as long as we're here, we're in school. Once school's over, it's time to go.
Yeah,
but until then, we're in school.
I'm gonna use that word.
Okay.
Earth school. Great.
Okay. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Liz.